Hi, welcome back to Deadly Affirmations, the video novel. Today we're going to finish chapter 4, and I think you're in for a treat. I think you'll enjoy it. Wait! Wasn't that a paperback book? The kind you can buy at Amazon.com? Just a thought. Just saying. Okie doke. Back to work. If you're ready, we can begin. The Richmond Hotel was located in the bad part of town, but its bar was a terrific little pub that had the best music in town. Unfortunately, since it was a pub, there were always drunken assholes, but Patience' daily affirmation would guide her. Patience walked through the glass door and into the little bar. The band was tearing the place up, and Patience recognized some of her barroom buddies. She made eye contact with Bruce, an old friend who played an amazing variety of musical instruments, who was sitting at a table in the second row back from the little stage where the fiddlers were frantically bowing. Patience smiled at Bruce and nodded that she would be right there. She walked to the bar, and Mary, the bartender, came right over and asked, "The usual?" Patience nodded, and before she could fish a tenner out of her pocket, Mary had returned with a wine glass full of the Recorderlick strawberry lime cider that Patience loved. Patience paid and thanked Mary and then threaded her way through the revelers to Bruce's table. She put the glass down and leaned over to kiss Bruce's cheek. Then she sat down, took a sip of the sweet nectar, and proceeded to lose herself in the propulsive French-Canadian music. Her reverie lasted through 2 songs until a tall, skinny guy wearing an ugly brown Pendleton flannel shirt, khaki cargo shorts, and navy blue Vans with no socks, and clutching a PBR in his hand like it was the last beer on earth, pushed his way past her toward the stage, almost knocking her off her chair, yelling, "Freebird!" He actually didn't quite get to the stage, but stood right in front of her, blocking her view of the musicians. Patience slipped her hand inside the pocket of her jacket and grasped the triple X joint. She took her hand out of her pocket and surreptitiously tossed the joint onto the floor next to the hipster's left foot. She waited for 30 seconds before jabbing a finger into the skinny guy's thigh. He turned to her, expecting her to tell him to get out of her way. Patience smiled, crooked her finger, and motioned for him to lean down to talk to her. He did. Patience moved her head so that her lips were next to his ear, waited 10 seconds so that he could smell the heady aroma of the oleander she wore, and whispered, "Did you drop that?" When the skinny asshole moved his head back to look quizzically at her, Patience pointed at the joint on the floor next to his foot. Asshole's face broke into a smile when he realized what lay on the floor. "Yeah, hey, thanks. Want to fire it up with me?" he said. "No, thanks," she told him, batting her eyelashes in an innocently wanton way. "I'm a cider kind of girl. Why don't you come back and see me when you're finished with that, and maybe we can have a dance?" The big jerk smiled and nodded and almost raced for the side door out into the alley. Patience finished her cider, and Bruce volunteered to visit the bar to refill it so Patience would miss none of the playing. When Bruce returned, the band took a break and came over to their table to say hi. Bruce introduced the players to Patience, and she was thrilled when not one but both of the fiddlers kissed her hand. They stayed and reminisced with Bruce and made a point to include Patience in their conversation. Real gentlemen. Then their break was over, and they took the stage again, dedicating their first song, La Belle Catherine, to Patience. Patience smiled, ducked her head in acknowledgement, took off her jacket, and stood up to dance, holding out her hand for Bruce to join her. The two whirled and twirled at the edge of the stage, and by the end of the song, the whole bar was whooping and hollering. When they returned to their table, Patience told Bruce that she had to go. He kissed her cheek, and she stood and put her jacket back on. Then she walked toward the door, waving to the band, and then to Mary at the bar. Patience got home, fed Abraxas, grabbed a can of the Swedish cider from the fridge, shed her clothes, and sprawled out on the couch, wearing only her delicious lacy panties. She sipped the cider and fired up the good joint, inhaling the sweet smoke. Great music, good drinks, fine company with Bruce and the band, and an annoyance taken care of. Problem solved! Eventually, Patience went to bed. On Saturday morning, Wheezy Hayes opened her front door to get the paper. She took it inside and set it on the kitchen table next to her tea and toast. She spent the next 15 minutes doing her daily jumble, reading the obituaries, looking for people she knew, and then finally scanning the news. On page 3, there it was. Drug addict, dead in alley. She read about some 20-something young man who had been found dead as a trout in the alley behind the Richmond Hotel. Some kind of drug overdose, the paper said. But Weezy reread the story and got that feeling again. A murder. Another murder. How exciting. Then she took the paper, changed the newspaper in Bruno's cage, and tossed out the soiled news. She had some work to do. Patience was coming over for quiche and mimosas. What fun! And Weezy could talk to Patience about the crime wave in River City.